I'm going to talk you through a part A from the Christianity Eduqas A Level paper. And this is a part A, so it's worth 20 marks. And so the examiners want to see that you have got a good level of subject knowledge. You can use and unpack and explain sources of wisdom, which for our side of the course are usually Bible passages, that you can refer to scholars and schools of thought. Although in a Bible-based question like this, that isn't always necessary, and your scholars might be someone like St. Paul. And also that you have got a good level of religious language and key terms. I have chosen this question deliberately because I think when candidates think of Theme 1B, resurrection, they think of N.T. Wright, Boltman, did the resurrection happen? And that is the bulk of that bit of the spec. However, it's not everything. The spec also says that you have to be able to say or explain what the resurrection accounts, so the Gospels and St. Paul, particularly in 1 Corinthians, teaches about death, the soul and the afterlife. And so because I think this is a bit of the spec that gets forgotten, it's what I'm going to focus on first. So I'm going to talk you through how I have structured my answer as well as the subject content, why I have chosen particular passages, why I have phrased things in the way that I have. And I'm going to talk to you as the person who's written this under test conditions, so it's not perfect, but as someone who thinks like an examiner because I mark lots of candidates' work. So I am starting with an introduction, and that is controversial. Lots of teachers will say, don't have an introduction, get straight into the meat of your essay. And to be honest, if you're someone who struggles with timing, that's probably good advice. Also, if you're someone who's calm in exams, probably don't need an introduction. If you're someone who's very good at linking back to the question and staying on topic, you might not need an introduction. However, if you would benefit from a settler, and also if you would benefit from using your introduction as almost like a little mini plan and to keep you on track, then have one, but make it short like this one. It would be odd if you read the question, maybe highlighted or boxed the key words, so resurrection accounts, death, soul, afterlife. You wrote a little plan, and then you wrote a paragraph that mirrored the question, and then you didn't answer the question because you would expect to carry on with the framework that you had set up. So if we look at my opening paragraph, you will see that I have mirrored words from the question in my introduction. So I've used the phrase resurrection accounts, which is here, and death, soul, and the afterlife. Okay, which is here. Death, soul, and afterlife. I have also let the examiner know that I am going to be using sources of wisdom, so you jolly well better give me a good mark. I've also let the examiner know that I have a good understanding of the link between our resurrection and Jesus' resurrection. And I have deliberately used key language like evangelists rather than just saying gospel writers. So I have set the conditions to get a high mark. So I don't think that's a waste of a minute, but it's your call. So, you will notice that in the title there are 3 elements to this question: death, soul, and afterlife. And so I have 3 main body paragraphs. The first one is focused on death, and look how I have echoed the wording of the title. Explain what the resurrection accounts teach about death. The resurrection accounts teach about death. I then have a soul paragraph. So soul was the second in the list of 3. it's there. And then the final part of the question is focusing on afterlife, and this is my afterlife paragraph here. If you have a question that has got multiple parts, to get in the top band, you have to address all of those parts. And so this is a good way to structure that kind of question. Give each part a paragraph each. Okay? And you might want to tick them off on the question as you do them to keep you on track. So this paragraph is about death. And so if we look, and I'm going to miss some of these out because I'm doing it very quickly, the word death or dead appears throughout this paragraph. And so you can see that it is very focused on the question. The examiner is looking for sources of wisdom, and so I flagged them up. I've got Matthew, and I've got 1 Corinthians here, and I've got St. Paul, who's linking back with Hosea, and he's also going to link back to the story of Genesis and to Adam, which is here. And so you can see how my sources of wisdom are all the way through this paragraph. St. Paul is there as well, look. So the first quote that I have used is from Matthew 10:28. Please remember, I'm not your average student, I'm an RE teacher, and so I know it's in 10:28. However, if you said Matthew, that would be fine. I also know the quote, but again, you might just summarise it. So, Matthew says we should not be afraid of those that can kill the body. Okay, remember the focus of this is about death. So the kind of death that we should be worried about isn't a physical death. Because, and here's why I do my unpacking and explaining, Jesus has offered the solution to that. Okay, the dead can be raised. And therefore, because Jesus has offered the possibility of life after death, death is no longer scary. But if you question Jesus' resurrection, you're also questioning your own, and vice versa. I then make a nice link between St. Paul and Adam and the story of Genesis. And St. Paul makes the point that the first man, Adam, was the one that brought sin and death into the world. So Adam originally was going to live forever in the Garden of Eden. And then the apple happened and it all went wrong. And one of the punishments that was given to Adam was that he was going to return to the ground. He was going to die. But Jesus, who is sometimes called the second Adam, and I could have made that point here, lifts that curse. And so whereas the first Adam brings death into the world, the second Adam removes death from the world. And Jesus has defeated evil through his act of atonement. I've used that word deliberately to impress. And so now a victory over death has been won. And that takes me to my final source of wisdom, which is death, where is your sting? That's quite a nice little quote to remember. I think of a bumblebee and that helps me remember it. What's important is looking at this paragraph. There are sources of wisdom, but there's much more that's me explaining those sources of wisdom. So in between each passage, each source of wisdom, which is highlighted in pink, I have explained what that quote is saying about death. And as I said, you can see that the word dead or death is almost in every single line. And so this is very, very sharply focused on the question. Our next paragraph is about the soul. And so just as in the paragraph above the word death appeared, in this one the word soul appears again and again through this paragraph. I'm also highlighting my sources of wisdom. So I talk from Matthew's perspective, and again I'm going to use the same source of wisdom here, which suggests that maybe it's a good one for you to at least paraphrase if you don't know it word for word. There's a lot there to know word for word. But we're going to here say that what you should be scared of if you're a Christian is not the death of your body, but the death of your soul, and that can happen in hell. So can you see how I've used the same source of wisdom, but I've switched the focus from death to the soul? And I use this nice little analysis phrase, this infers, or unpacking phrase. The soul is harder to kill than the body. The soul is not imperishable. However, it's only in hell that the soul can be destroyed. I've then explained the background to this passage. So this is Jesus sending the disciples off to preach, and they are scared. They're doing something that is dangerous. Their bodies are in danger. But Jesus is reminding them that what they should be scared of is the fate of their souls, not their bodies. And again, that point is explained there. And then the final paragraph is focused on the afterlife. And so once again, the word afterlife is going to be used repeatedly in this paragraph to show that I am very, very focused on the question. So once again, St. Paul is my main source of wisdom. So St. Paul talking to the first Christians, and St. Paul laments, he feels sad. But because I'm trying to impress the examiner, I use the word lament, I don't use the word sad, that he has to remain in this physical body when he would far rather be in the afterlife, because that's a far superior form of existence. I haven't memorised the whole quote, but I have remembered little snippets. So life with Jesus, the afterlife is better by far. St. Paul also contrasts heavenly bodies with physical bodies, and your heavenly bodies are raised in splendour. That's a snippet of a quote, and they are imperishable when contrasted to our mortal physical bodies. But look here, I've paused and I've unpacked what it is that St. Paul is saying, and once again making that contrast between Adam, whose physical body returned to dust, and Jesus, who enables us to rise and have an afterlife with a spiritual body, and a transformation from the physical to the spiritual. And once again, I've got a little snippet of a text that says that there will be a sounding of a trumpet when that transformation happens. So just to recap very quickly. Introduction, saying what I'm going to do, but it's very, very short and it's to keep me on track. I then have a paragraph that focuses on each of the three strands of the question. So death, soul, and afterlife. In each paragraph I have got sources of wisdom, and then I have paused and unpacked them and explained the context. I've tried to link passages together to give the sense of the narrative of the Bible, so talking about Adam in Genesis and linking him to Jesus, who's sometimes called the second Adam. I've linked back St. Paul to the prophet Hosea. I've also deliberately used religious terms and language, so words like atonement. In the paragraph on the soul, I talk about a dualist distinction between the body and the soul, and that phrase was chosen deliberately to impress the examiner. And then in each paragraph, I'm repeatedly using the words that are the focus of the question. So in this one, death running all the way through, the soul running all the way through, and then in the final paragraph, the word afterlife running through my question.